that they're changing my voice. This video is about Genesis 14, where Abram rescues Lot. There's a lot of kings fighting with each other. The kings of Sodom and Gomorrah are singled out as having some of their men falling into tar pits. And this has everything to do with the destruction of Sodom, the state of being that they're in, why homosexuality is a sin, what have you. So after we get to, eventually we'll get to Genesis 17, okay, where we talk about the covenant of circumcision. Genesis 18 will be the three visitors, these three angels that visit him, and Abraham pleading with God for Sodom and Gomorrah. And we'll get to Genesis 19, where it talks about Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed. Okay, so let's just breeze through this. It's a little bit confusing. I'll help you understand it, and we'll wrap this up here. At the time when Amraphel was king of Shinar, that's Babylonia, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedor Laomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. These kings went to war against Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. Now keep in mind, this story, like the whole Bible, doesn't matter. Okay, what matters is that God set me apart as the top martial artist ever possible. If you do unto others as you would have them do unto you, you wouldn't cheat me out of my right to lead, and you should obey God through me. Okay, that's what matters. Okay, so some people like to play silly games, like he doesn't know what he's talking. Don't forget that those people are evil, they're ignorant, okay, they don't want to debate me publicly, and that says everything you need to know about them. Obviously they're hell-bound and so on and so forth. Okay. All these latter kings joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Dead Sea Valley. For 12 years they had been subject to Kedor Laomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. So the latter kings in verse 2, right, they take on the guys in verse 1. In the 14th year, Kedor Laomer and the kings allied with him went out and defeated the Rephites in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, the Zuzites in Ham, the Emites in Shaveh, Kirathem, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as Paran near the desert. Now some of you might say the Horites and Seir, right? Seir is Aries scramble. Okay, now first of all, you got to look at the time period. The actual martial art order is not in Egypt at the time. Why? Because it's later on. It's not the old kingdom or pre-dynastic Egypt. Later on, you get a bunch of Khan whores, fake Horuses. You get all kinds of Horus, son of Osiris. You get all kinds of these false conceptions that confuse the hell out of everything. So they're taking on some guys who aren't actually Horus kings, if that even refers to that. Okay, as far as El Paran near the desert. And El Paran has, rape lanes scrambled into it, so on and so forth. Then they turned back and went to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, as they conquered the whole territory of the Amalekites. See, Amalekites, as well as the Amorites who were living in Hazazon Tamar. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, marched out and drew up their battle lines in the valley of Siddim against Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goyim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar. 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim is full of tar pits. And when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some of the men fell into them, and the rest fled to the hills. 4 kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food. Then they went away. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions. So you see that when Kedor Laomer side had won, okay, they seized the goods of these guys who they defeated, and they also seized Abram's nephew Lot and his possession, since he was living in Sodom. A man who escaped came and reported this to Abram the Hebrew. Now Abram was living near the great trees of Mamre, the Amorite, a brother or a relative or an ally of Eshcol and Aner, all of whom were allied with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan. So notice he doesn't hesitate. He gets these guys who are trained fighters, trained warriors, and he goes right after them. During the night, Abram divided his men to attack them, and he routed them. pursuing them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. See how it's subtly there that Abram is somebody who's military sort of minded, right? He's martial art minded. He recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions together with the women and the other people. After Abram returned from defeating Chedorlaomer and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Sheva, that is the king's valley. Now there's different ways to look at why he won. One, these guys have fought a lot of battles. Maybe they were low on men. Two, you can look at it as those guys weren't so low on men. They had recruited from the people they conquered, and they, forced them to fight on their side, what have you. Okay. But one way or another, the story is that, Abram, because of righteousness, won in principle. And it's because that principle, because there's martyrs in the Bible, what have you, including Samson in the Old Testament, because of that principle, we see that Melchizedek comes forth here. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, if I remember correctly, it means the king of righteousness, brought out bread and wine. See, there's bread and wine, right? Like the Last Supper. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand." Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. So you have that tenth. Now, it's also profoundly disgraceful for the people on this planet to go out of their way to financially sabotage me instead of treat me fairly in that regard. The king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the people and keep the goods for yourselves." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "With raised hand I have sworn an oath to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, 'I made Abram rich.' I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten, and the share that belongs to the men who went with me to Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them have their share." And there you have that word Mamre again, right? Mamre, going back to the trees.